Hello, everybody. This is Jake Sensei, host Jake and Gino podcast here with my co-host, the multifamily mentor, the coach, chef, the father, six, the best-selling author, the G Daddy, Gino Barber. Gino, how's it going?
Jake, I am doing good, fully clothed, and I'm ready to go, my friend.
Ask me how I'm doing.
How you doing?
Always making it happen, big man. Today's guest is the best-selling author of Culture to Culture. Now, company culture influences the roles and responsibilities of every employee within the organization. In his book, Culture to Culture, he presents a behavior-driven system to operationalize company culture and increase employee engagement. Man, those are some big words. He's got to be a doctor. So without further ado, Dr. Donte Vaughn, welcome to the show.
Jake, Gino, thanks for having me.
All right, give us a little background on yourself, how you got started in business and ultimately led up to your current venture.
Sure. So I've been in the world of business and leadership and culture for about 17 years now. You know, I started in operations and I worked in retail ops, logistics, and then I pivoted and started working more in heavy industrial and served many roles from the front line all the way to senior leadership and you know, understood and was drawn to the dynamics between people and how people come together and what makes them click and what are the factors that influences how, you know, people are able to be productive as in high performing, right? And I really navigated that coming up as a young man. You know, I grew up in Philly, born and raised, navigating the inner city. You know, I always played sort of like Switzerland. I could have ran with the street guys. I could have ran with the nerds, right? I was right in between and I was always fascinated by how the dynamics of groups. And that really is what led me academically down that path of just understanding just people dynamics, the science of people and that is what really motivated me to study, you know, organizational leadership and culture principles, and that led me all the way down to the doctoral path of, you know, exploring those specific factors that influences learning and development, and how do you just bring a group of people who are all different and unique and make them function effectively to drive success in a business, right? And that's what led me to meet my partner Randall and Sean, and we started to really build out this vision around what we call culture performance management in the book. How do you operationalize culture and not treat it like this arbitrary, you know, intangible thing in business? It's something that's real. How people engage.
Define operationalize for the folks.
You know, when I talk about operationalize, I mean it in the context of systematically, proactively managing company culture, right? You don't have to treat culture as this arbitrary, intangible thing that just kind of evolves organically. And if I have some donut parties and some streamers and everyone feels happy, then I'm okay. That's not how you manage and impact company culture. So how do we systematically approach defining, implementing, measuring culture in a way that really starts to impact how you strategically improve it?
Dr. D, someone once told me, seek and ye shall find. And, you know, Jake and I, over the last few weeks, have been really blessed to have the last 4 or 5 podcasts about things that we've been, I wouldn't say struggling about, but growing. One was on branding. One was on core values. One was on scaling. And now, from culture to culture, I got the book here. We need help
everywhere, don't we?
And it's amazing how, you know, you sit and you pray and you say, well, what's my next step? What do I do? We get you booked on. I read the book. I'm like, thank you, because this is what I sort of needed, because we're trying to build an amazing culture. And we've done that through our Jake and Gino education. The community is phenomenal. Over 40,000 units closed, over $2 billion in assets under management that the students have done. I'm truly proud of that. They come to our events. They're fired up. I guess we got lucky and it's a ton of work, but I'm excited to really dive into what culture performance management is and the myths of company culture and how do people take that next step into building culture. So everyone out there, seek and you shall find. When you're looking for something, it doesn't magically appear. It comes into your life because you're really focusing on it. So cultural performance management, can you just like really define that for us?
You know, when we talk about CPM, right, there are some what we call the 7 pillars of culture performance management. There are sequential steps and actions that organizations can take to effectively define, implement, measure, and really sustain a desired culture. It doesn't happen arbitrarily. So when we talk about culture performance management, that's what we're speaking to, that system. And we take a very methodical approach to how we guide an organization through understanding what do they want as a desirable culture, what are the specific actions that leaders should be taking to foster that culture, because we believe leaders own the culture, not the other way around, right? And so how do we build a standard language and understanding and consciousness around that culture that you're trying to drive? How do you build action around that? And then how do you effectively measure it and refine it? And as part of that is, look, just because you have a desired culture, that culture is perpetuated by your leaders and how they behave, how they interact, and how they make decisions. And assuming that any leader can actually practice those behaviors automatically is asinine. How do you foster learning and practice of the behaviors that embody those core values that connect to your culture in the first place? And how do you do that in a way that they have an opportunity to refine it and improve it over time? That's proactive management of company culture, not taking in a lagging indicator of an employee survey 6 months or twice a year and say, hey, how do you feel about the culture arbitrarily that you know nothing about, that we're trying to drive, just based on your own personalized experience, and then try to synthesize those findings and react to them. In many scenarios, that's why you see stagnation in your employee engagement results, because it's a reactionary approach to try to build strategies that oftentimes are circumstantially driven by an employee's perspective, and the damage has already happened. The negative experience has already happened. How do we get in front of that? And that's what we focus on with CPM.
In the book, I think you say this is all common sense 2 generations ago. And once the corporations broke the trust, it ended. And my problem is we're getting stupider as a society. Our educational system sucks. It's getting worse. They're dumbing us down. Everything that's common sense in this book, it seems like revelations. It's a great book because it's stuff that we're not taught. That's the problem that I have with this stuff. It's really commonsensical. 2 generations ago, there was trust between the corporation and between the individual. Once you start having these massive layoffs, and I understand individuals don't trust corporations anymore, and that's where it goes. But I want to read these 7 pillars for everybody. I want them to write it down, and we can go through them real quick. The first one is select, number 1, everybody. The second one is define. The third one, connect. 4 is learn. 5 is practice. 6 is measure. And 7 is refine. Now, if you didn't get them, go buy the book, write them down. If not, go back and read them again. And I want Dr. D to go through all 7 real quick and how we can start implementing them and how we can start, creating our culture and taking control of it.
No doubt, no doubt. So when we talk about select, we're talking about selecting a value system. Look, we all got to be grounded or rooted in a shared set of values. Every culture you can think of inside an organization and outside an organization has a set of shared values, because those values become the foundation of the standard by which everyone shows up for one another, how they engage, how they interact every day. So you need a system by which you have these values rooted, right? And most organizations, man, I could blow the dust off of the picture frame sitting in their conference room that have all these vague values on the wall. Those have been prescribed as, hey, here are the values that we believe are important for our business to thrive or succeed. You need that value system. So first, you got to blow the dust off of it and understand what those values are and how they're defined, because oftentimes those definitions are stagnant or vague or unclear. The second pillar you spoke about was define. Just because you have values and some generic definition behind those values doesn't mean people can act on them. You need definition in the context of behavioral standards and expectations that you have for your leaders. How do I show up and embody trust, integrity, inclusiveness, right? If those are my core values, then what does that mean to me? Now, we go as far as defining down to the root of the role or responsibility of an individual. To be a CFO in an organization, integrity looks like this. To be an operator, integrity looks like this. So that definition becomes the standards of practice and how we expect everyone to show up and interact with one another, and rooted in all decisions that are made. So you have selection and definition. Most organizations never exceed those 2 pillars. They think they have,
But does it vary in between roles though? Because I guess I'm getting a little confused here. Because a CFO, versus somebody that works in the field or whatever, should their definition of integrity differ, or is it how it's applied?
How it's applied, not the core definition.
Yeah.
Integrity means something to everyone, but as an organization, integrity means X. However, how do I act on that? How do I exhibit that in my day-to-day role? And that's what we're speaking to in terms of that level of definition. Because look, if I'm a frontline operator and I'm moving widgets from point A to point B, your broad definition of integrity in terms of compliance and honestness and fiscal responsibility, that means shit to me, right? But if you tell me that integrity means this in terms of, look, if I have to document that I log 20 widgets per hour, then I'm a document I log 20 widgets. And if my goal was 25, I'm gonna write -5 and I'm gonna explain why. You have to break it down behaviorally.
Yeah, I get it. I just fear that it's like you don't want to go too narrow with it sometimes as well, because it's important, because defining what the integrity looks like in that role. But then it's like almost a slippery slope, because then it's like, well, you didn't tell me to be have integrity here, but you said it here. So
yeah, sure. Look,
I think there's some common sense that comes into it too. I'm not trying to get too.
I mean,
splitting
the
hairs.
idea is to take a very vague, sort of arbitrary, almost marketized definition of what it means, and you're trying to make it more tangible and real.
Yeah, I get it.
That's all, right? And that just gets us to pillar 2. Now we have to connect it, right? Because look, where does culture happen? Do you know the points of engagement, interacting, and decision making? Because if I want to improve behaviorally how I'm showing up as a leader, I have to know at what points am I perpetuating the desired culture or counterproductive culture. So mapping those points of engagement, interaction, and decision making, that's important, because I have to start to foster intentional learning and practice around those behaviors. I got to know where it happens. If I'm teaching you how to hold a football, you got to know at what points on the field does that particular position, posture, play apply, right? So pillar 3 is all about making the connection to all those points of engagement, interaction, and decision-making in your day-to-day. We don't actually go and engage at work and say, I'm gonna be intentional about exhibiting X behavior with Gino today, right? That's not always conscious for most leaders. They're not thinking about how they're actually perpetuating a culture. They just go in and they're in execution mode. So we say, wait a minute, slow up. Every point from the time you huddle with your team in the morning to your ops meeting to the time that you're walking the office or the production floor are opportunities to either promote or detract from the culture of the organization at large. Are you aware of those connections?
Based on how you're leading.
Sure. How you engage, how you interact, the decisions that you're making should be rooted in these behavioral standards. Most people don't even realize or are conscious of these interactions. They just do them. It becomes natural to them. Hey, I woke up, I greeted the person or didn't greet the person when I walked into the building. I didn't greet my receptionist, I didn't greet my employee. Then I went over and I started sending emails off. I wasn't even conscious of the fact that my tone, my disposition, or the decision-making I'm making, the decision-making I'm applying is even impacting the culture. Then I went to my first operations huddle for the day, and how I showed up and how I engaged the team and the level of communication perpetuates the culture, but I wasn't conscious of it. I just did it, right? What we find all over the globe is most leaders just lose sight of when they show up and at what points are they truly impacting culture. So pillar 3 is about, okay, I have a value system. I understand what these values mean in practice as actionable steps I can take to perpetuate that value. Now I know where I have opportunities to drive it home during certain points of engagement and interaction. But look, I'm not great at it. What if one of my core values is collaboration? And I've worked in a silo, most of my career, and now I have to foster this dynamic of collaboration. I need to learn and practice the behaviors surrounding collaboration. They're not always ingrained in individuals, or what it meant for me in another organization doesn't necessarily mean what it applies to in this new organization. So I gotta practice it. Well, You got to be conscious. It's like swinging a bat or any other sport, right? The coach comes out in real time and says, hey, your body posture, your position, man, it's off. You know, you need to adjust, and you adjust in real time, and you tweak and you improve over time. You may look at video footage after the fact, but it's that real time learning and practice. And what we call is experiential learning is what's perpetuating improvement in how you are engaging and interacting and making decisions. So from a systematic point of view, you need opportunities or mechanisms for leaders to provide feedback to one another about how well that they are practicing specific behaviors that relate to those core values. And you also need opportunities for self-reflection, because a part of behavioral learning or experiential learning, is that I have a moment of self-reflection and a moment of feedback that I can receive about how I'm actually showing up and embodying the behaviors that connect to my core values. Again, most organizations never really establish these mechanisms for coaching and feedback around the behaviors. No one's walking up saying, hey, I'm observing you in your performance as a leader or a supervisor or whomever. One of our core values is trust. Part of showing trust is being transparent with your team. I just watched you in your last meeting. You never told them why we adjusted the goals for the day. You just told them to do more. You didn't give them a reason why or explanation to what's happening in the business and what's driving those changes, right? Next time, make sure you try to be a little more transparent about that so they understand the root for why we're asking more of them. That kind of coaching is not happening in organizations. So are you truly perpetuating this culture of trust, right? It's not just this arbitrary thing. People naturally start to trust you. There are very specific behaviors that drive trustworthiness. And what we reinforce is understanding what those behaviors are and then giving leaders an opportunity to learn and practice those. That's pillar 4 and pillar 5. And we know that's not easy. That's why part of what we do in CultureWorx is we build tools for leaders to, one, understand what the behaviors are connected to their core values, but also mechanisms for learning and practice, because that's not easy. And we know that. Yeah. That's part of the work that we do in our business. That just gets you to pillar 4 and pillar 5. Now,
hang on real quick, because I think we want to break this down for folks into like a simple form, because what I'm hearing is self-awareness to walk the talk. So the leader needs to have self-awareness so that the talk, which is the values, isn't lip service.
You bet.
But we're all humans. So to get that awareness, you need feedback. So what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, is creating a feedback loop where the leader is going to be evaluated by peers or other leaders on how they're doing to drive culture. Okay. So now there's an opportunity for the leader in the quarter to get feedback from peers and other leaders on how, as objective as humanly possible, because this is where shit gets messy, is because it can get subjective, how they're driving the values, and then creating that opportunity for feedback to take place and then improvement, over quarters. Man, this sounds exhausting. I'm out of here. This is too much. It's hard work. No, this is work though. This is work if we're being honest about it.
But time out. On our quarterly plannings, we go through the Rockefeller habits. We go through the top 10. We see which ones we need to work on. So we're open as a team. We're collaborating as a team. And the one we falter on.
I'm messing a little bit too there, right? It's just like, this is work if you're going to do it right. That's well,
you got to do it right, because you want to have the right employees. You want to have the right culture. You want to save some money. The problem with culture is really hard to document how much you're actually saving. You can't go to a spreadsheet and say, hey, we saved X amount of money, or this is a marketing thing. We've got cost per click. It's very hard to manage. But I'll tell you, when the culture is working, there's a feeling of like, you just feel great. And like when we're at this last event, Jake, in Knoxville a couple of weeks ago, you saw the culture at work. People were collaborating. Who collaborates in multifamily and education? It's a dog eat dog world. But in our group, there is collaboration. There's people working together. There's people that want to create success and helping other people out. So when the culture does work, you'll see a market improvement in the way you feel and the way the organization feels. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Well, Gino, I think you need a metric on it. So I think one way to do it is to have the leader, similar to a net promoter score. You could systematize this by having not only team members, but also peers rate the leader in a similar fashion on how well they're pulling through core values in order to systematize and give a direct metric to the result that they're looking to achieve. Is that fair to
Jake,
say?
you're spot on. That gets into our measurement piece. So this is where our software tools come into play, because you're absolutely right. We recommend that you measure both quantifiably and qualifiably how those leaders are embodying or practicing the behaviors that connect to your core values. We literally have a cultural performance management score and an engagement score as it relates to not the engagement between leader and employee, engagement between leader and leader as well. So you're right, because that measurement becomes the mechanism for identifying where there's improvement or opportunity. And we measure by value because we want to show you, hey, you're struggling with this one core value. So that means behaviorally, you need to practice this. Now, learning and practice, you have feedback, that's a part of it, but you need some other mechanisms for learning. So we always adopt like microburst learning. If I want to read the play, read the best practices around the move, and then I'm going to go apply it in real time, and then I'm going to get feedback about how well I applied it. I'm minimizing the level of subjectivity in the feedback, because I also have a point of reference that's empirically validated. So we adopt microburst learning as an opportunity for greatest ability to apply those best practices behaviorally, but ultimately we're generating, based on those ratings or that feedback, both quantifiable and qualifiable metrics that can come out and then say, okay, I'm improving in my culture performance score. And we're not talking about employee engagement scores. Those are lagging indicators. They're great to measure only if the survey questions are rooted in the behavioral standards that connect to your core values, not no broad, generic line of questioning that you give your employees about how well did your leader speak to you today. No, the questions need to be rooted in the behavioral expectations you have for your leaders in the first place. That's still lagging. I want to know in real time how I'm showing up. I want to see the stats of the game today. And that's where you get into this need for measurement around leadership, feedback, self-reflective feedback. We have a rating system in our software, so it generates a numerical score. So you're spot on, Jake.
Hey, okay. I'm gonna play devil's advocate just for my gut right now. Okay.
Let's do it.
Nature versus nurture. I believe that some people are fixed, and I'm gonna say up to 80%. 80% as an adult, you're fixed and you ain't changing the rest of it. I think 20% is coachable. So I think there's people that are going to literally be a non-core value fit because they fall below that 80%, and they're just not going to be a fit based on who they are as a human. But I do believe there's a 20, and this is total bullshit. I don't have any data to back this up. This is human experience, but I believe there's a 20% movement there where people can be coached. What say you?
There's a thing called social learning theory that says, look, if you get enough leaders practicing and embodying the core values, meaning behaviorally showing up, engaging, interacting, and making decisions, those others through social learning will begin to apply and adopt or adapt those behaviors. Those individuals, to your point, who don't—
that's my 20% theory, right?
That's
there.
your 20%.
Yeah.
Those, and we can argue the percentages, but those who simply don't have a capacity. Now, keep in mind, I'm giving you opportunities to learn and practice, because I'm not presuming you automatically know how to embody these behaviors. Yeah. But through learning and practice, you will always have those who are dispositionally inequipped to embody certain behaviors, given their nature or psychological makeup or what have you. In those scenarios, then yes, there are some hard conversations you as a senior leader has to have around that individual. Hey, nice work, but you don't— if I believe this culture is actually driving results for my business, I'm basically telling you that you're not a good fit for my business, because I need people practicing and embodying these behaviors because they drive outcomes. They drive our fulfillment of our purpose and our mission and our vision. That's why we work with our clients and we say, don't arbitrarily choose values because they sound good or because you think the market wants you to say it. Pick values that are rooted in behaviors that you believe are necessary to run your business, because that's why they become really important. That's where it starts to get tangible in terms of your behavioral ownership and accountability as a leader, because you said that these behaviors are what's driving positive outcomes in your business in the first place. So to your point, look, you're always going to have, that's when we say you promote what you permit. If you let Bobby, who's been here for 30 years, who doesn't practice or embody any of these core values, but because of your loyalty, right, you keep him along, but he becomes a negative proponent of the culture, you have to start having some hard conversations.
And it's going to piss the rest of the team members off because you're permitting Bobby to do it, but you're holding me to a different level.
You lose all integrity around the culture at that point.
But you just said you have an unwavering ethics as a core value.
Right.
So now you're going hypocrite on yourself.
No, I'm saying that's the point. You're making my point.
No, we're in alignment. Yeah. I'm saying I'm like just speaking out loud of how it makes you look.
That's why we say, look, you promote what you permit. How you letting Bobby over here?
I love that. You promote what you permit. That's so damn true. I mean, that's really like your actions speak louder than words. Yeah.
You bet.
Dr. D, I'm going to mention the myths that you have in the book, and then I want you to attack a couple of them. Number one is develop organically. Number two is employee feedback is the best measure. The third one is higher pay equals higher culture. Then it's performance goes up as culture goes up. And then the last one that I have written down here is there is a right or wrong culture. Which one of those one or two do you want to like really highlight and say, guys, you're not thinking of this right? That's a myth. All
right. They all could be hot buttons, but let me talk about one first. And that is because it's a hot topic in general. This whole conversation around wage, right, and pay. I am an advocate for living wage and paying people accordingly. Right. And I've said with even my own team, look, if how much you're making is top of mind when you come to work because you're concerned if you're going to be able to make ends meet or pay your bills, and we have a problem. And we need to.
What is a living wage, though? Do you have a definition of living wage? I know it's market specific.
You have minimum wage per the federal government standards of what they think people are required to not live impoverishedly, right?
Does anyone make minimum wage anymore in a small business, especially? We're not even close. Like,
right. So you have that measurement, right? But then you have, look, what's the reality of my cost of living, and am I making a wage that enables me to cover my costs and secure a stable future financially for myself or for my family or what have you? So when I say living wage, I mean living wage in terms of living wage progressively in the context of hey, I can pay my bills and I can do what I need to do to have financial stability. I'm not talking about wealth management. I'm not talking about any of that.
No, I got you. Yeah.
Right. So when I say living wage, that's the context. Now, we can all judge what that number is. That's irrelevant to me. I have no ideological view on that. But what I am saying is individuals think as long as I'm paying my people well or more or what have you, then their experience will be better. And the reality is what you're paying for is people's time. Their time is a measurement, not in their output. You're paying for their time. And you hope during that time, you get the most out of them per their claims of their ability or capacity. But guess what? How do you get the most out of a person is the experience you foster, how you are engaging, how you're interacting, the decisions you're making with or around that individual. That's what's driving the most out of that experience. At the end of the day, that experience, and that's been proven through Gallup surveys, Red Brick Group, all these different studies that have proven that the primary motivator for individuals, especially of a millennial generation and younger, is not rooted in monetary compensation. It doesn't mean it's not important, but what it speaks to is, hey, my experience, the value of my time is rooted in my experience while I'm there. That's why you get your most underperforming employee still coming to you saying they want more, because their experience is not rooted in, hey, value of dollar versus contribution to the business. They care about the experience, and is it purpose driven or value driven for them more than it is about wages. So this
get the money right, check that off the box, and then put good oil and gas into the sports car in terms of what that culture is. So what I'm saying is that you got to get the money right in terms of the wage needs to be reasonable and fair and whatever the hell the metric or statement you want to say. Get the money to a reasonable point. But then from there, you need to pour in to make sure you're maximizing or your return on investment to get the most out of that team member. And that's not just pay is what you're saying. There's more that goes into
if people attach, hey, I pay well or competitive.
So I'm done. I don't got to do anything else.
I'm not doing anything. My culture is good. You could have the most worst culture ever, but because you are over market and pay, which is not sustainable over time, then you think you're okay because you don't have high turnover.
Yeah.
No. You just happen to be in a spot where you're overcompensating in the marketplace based on your competitors, which is boding well for you, but your culture sucks, right? And so that's where the myth comes in. The other myth that stands out for me is this notion of organic culture, this notion that, well, culture kind of just happens and it's based on my people and what have you. And it's like, no. You set the tone. You drive ownership and accountability around how you want your leaders to show up. Otherwise, you will perpetuate 15 different subcultures in your organization that are really driving your how outcomes in your business that you can then have difficulty managing and predicting, right? So this notion that culture is this intangible thing is not reasonable in our opinion, because you set the standard. The minute you describe to your leaders how you want them to show up, you already are setting the standard. The minute you post on your website all these values, you prescribe how you expect people to engage and interact. Now, you choosing not to do anything with that is a flaw on your end as a business leader, but don't pretend like this culture that you've prescribed just happens arbitrarily. It's because you're taking very specific action to drive that culture.
To all the listeners out there, go and listen to the Jake and Gino podcast we recorded a few weeks ago with Dr. Jennifer Thomas. She talks about the 5 love languages and apologies and working in the workplace. Amazing. We've interviewed Dr. Gary Chapman. I know, Jake, the 5 love languages, it's a little touchy-feely, but it
I like
really
the
works.
Touchy-feely one. That was my love language.
You like that one, huh? And the point I'm trying to make here is 79% of the people in the workforce who leave their job is because there's a lack of appreciation. So I'm just backing up what Dr. D is saying over here. It's not just about the money. I'm not being appreciated. And maybe that appreciation comes with I'm wasting my time here and I'm not being valued, and there's no core value alignment with how I feel, what the company feels. 79%. That's almost 8 out of every 10 people. Think about that, everybody. Appreciate your people and let them know that there's a vision that you're working for, why they're packing boxes or why they're making cold calls or why they're up with a client. What are they doing? Foster the culture, pay them well, and they will stay with you. Last question before we go to the short answers, I would say is, we talked offline a little bit. How do we foster this culture virtually? Because that's the challenge right now. We're back to work. We've got these amazing events that I was speaking to you about. I love getting together with people. Like I said, I hug you and fist bump you if I could. I'm a touchy-feely guy too. I think that's one of my love languages also. I'm not going to be honest, lie with you. But how do we do it virtually? How do companies do that? Because a lot of people don't want to go back into the workforce. They just don't want to go back into the job. They love being at home. They love hanging out. They love working from house. And they think they're more efficient at home, which I totally disagree with that logic also. But give us some tips to work virtually and building culture.
In building culture virtually, the methodology still stands, right? And so in this context, you still need a value system. That doesn't change because you're interacting over a virtual platform. You still need definition around what that looks like. But guess what? Some of the examples to make it real and tangible to people may change a little, depending on how people show up in person and their interactions and the environment, and things look a little different virtually, but the premise behind the definition is still standard. It still applies. You may have to help them connect. Hey, yes, we know it's virtual, but the way we show up in this way. For example, integrity. Well, part of integrity behaviorally means doing what you say you're going to do, which means just like we expect you to show up on time in person for a meeting, we expect you to show up on time virtually. All those little examples you just may tweak to appeal to this virtual format. Making those connections becomes important, especially over a virtual format, because sometimes virtual is a little less, it's more autonomous. People tend to work a bit more in silos. Being intentional about some of those scheduled and recurring interactions, where they're happening, when they're happening, knowing that in advance, challenging people to build a meeting matrix, understand where these connections are happening over a virtual platform becomes important, because I still, as a leader, are you going to invite me into certain connections that you're having? Maybe it's not a client meeting, but maybe it's a strategic planning session, and you want someone in to help observe you, to give you some feedback offline about how well you're perpetuating that culture. You want to still take those intentional approaches and both reflecting on how well you're embodying the core value and giving others an opportunity to observe you. So mapping those things out, just understanding through a virtual platform. Be intentional about saying over a virtual platform, leverage technology to your benefit. What if at the start of every meeting, I had a pop-up on our intranet that spoke to a core value or behaviors that we all want to be focusing on for the week or for the month? Being intentional about bringing consciousness and awareness to that becomes important. Learning and practice. There's so many learning and practice tools that reinforce the values or behaviors, leveraging those things. So you can see technology as a barrier, or you can say, hey, well, do the best we can with this virtual or hybrid scenario, just still be proactive and intentional around it. And we find that there's still a lot of culture improvement that can be realized over a virtual platform. It just takes a bit more effort and intentionality, even down to, hey, everyone's required to have their video on during my meetings. You don't get to
can't trust people that don't have the video on.
Right. Like, what are you doing? Right. It's so many little subtleties that can help be intentional and reinforcing a certain culture.
I'm afraid of technology. I sent my first Zoom meeting out to someone the other day, though. I was coached on it, and so I'm coming a long way. But anyways,
look, I'm a touchy-feely guy too, in the context of I like human interaction, but there's a way to foster it virtually.
I gotcha. All right, gang, let's take a quick time out to hear from our sponsor.
Are you looking for ways to improve your life?
Here at Jake and Gino, our mission is to empower students through financial education and the vehicle of multifamily investing.
Yes, Jake. We agree that a person with financial intelligence can change the world for the better.
We've created our proprietary 3-step framework, buy right, manage right, and finance right, that we teach to our community. This framework, along with education, our one-on-one mentorship, on-site boot camps, and the amazing community, has propelled our students to massive success.
We've all been there. We've had so many students that have been able to shift their mindset, overcome limiting beliefs, and set a clear path to achieve their goals. Whether you're currently fixing and flipping, wholesaling, or buying single-family rentals, and you know that multifamily investing is the right vehicle for you, I encourage you to visit jakeandgino.com/apply to schedule your complimentary consultation with our team. And I want to let you know this isn't a high-pressure sales call. It's really just a discovery call to get to know each other better and see if we're a good fit for working together. And if for any reason we're not a good fit, our team has tons of resources we will share with you to help you along your journey.
If you're ready to stop spinning your wheels, go to jakeandgino.com/apply and schedule your call now.
All right, we're back. I'm probably going to go down a road that, you don't like right now, because I think it's the opposite of what you've been promoting. But my biggest fear as a leader is that I'm similar to Michael from The Office. Have you seen The Office? Do you know that show?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And the reason is we have a party planning committee, and I really get into this shit. Yeah, like when we like do, whitewater rafting, we do ATV trips, we do a lot of fun stuff. And I'm almost fearful that that's the opposite of what you're promoting here, because a lot of what you're doing is, if you can't, measure it, you can't manage it, and you're trying to systematize the culture process. So unpack that a little more so I can get clear on that, and then I'll ask my follow-up questions. So, when it comes to, building culture, what is your take on the parties and the fun stuff, and does it have a place? Do you like it? Yes or no?
Sure. I think it has a place. I just don't think it's the end all be all. People work for people. They don't remember how many pizza parties you had. They don't remember any of that. What they remember is the experiences they've had. I go all the way back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the end of the day, people want a sense of belonging. People want a sense of connection, appreciation for the work they do. They want to be rooted in safety and security and feel purpose-driven. You're not going to realize that through a pizza party. Now, here's the thing. Those events are very important. You ever hear about the employees who are literally disgruntled during an employee event or the employee fair or the company picnic or whatever? As positive as that organization tried to be around that event, People are standing in that meeting in the midst of that experience, disgruntled, not about that event, but about their experiences with that leader. It's almost appears disingenuous. They're like, really, we out here celebrating family and community and BS, because my experience yesterday wasn't anything that had to do with that event you just threw that was all fun and games. You know what, that 20 grand you just spent on that event, how did that play into my experience for the year I had before this event, right? So we always say, look, those events are important, but back them up with real behavior. So those leaders are actually embodying this theme for this event in the first place, right? So we say, look, there's a place for those events. People love those things. I love those things. But what are you doing to show up with integrity behind this culture you claim? Because that's not enough.
You can't be contradicting yourself. The event has to line up with the
reality,
company culture and the atmosphere that's real. Yeah.
Yes.
So one thing that I've seen work really well, and it was unintentional, was the times that we go build a playground for Habitat, or we go and give food back, or give food at the food bank locally. And these, man, the parties are fun, but there's something that happens in those events where you're actually giving back to your community that seem to have a greater positive impact on culture than any of the other shit. And that's just been my real life experience. So that's one thing I will challenge all the leaders out there. If you're not engaging in these events where you're giving back and participating in, different, community development type activities, check it out, because I think there's, just from a business perspective, there's a positive ROI on that. I mean, literally, your team's gonna be more engaged. You feel great afterwards, and I think it does help align. Depending on what your core values are, I think it makes a big difference. So,
sure.
All right.
What you're speaking to is a sense of belonging to a community, but also being purpose driven, and it reinforces to your employees that, hey, the work we're doing in our mission as an organization may be rooted in this product or this service, but it's bigger than that. People want to feel a sense of purpose beyond the work that they do, more with specificity. And I think that's what you're speaking to. That's why the experience is so positive. Now you question, okay, now after this event, then how do we perpetuate this or live this out in our own experiences when we're not doing community outreach? How do we create that same experience internally?
Okay. So I gave you my tip on the giving back and how it's a good culture builder. We're kind of flirting, walking the tightrope on the parties and stuff. You're the culture guy. Come on, you got to have some kind of like tip for me on, hey, this is a good morale builder. This is a good culture builder when it comes to different activities and events. I know that's not what you're here promoting today, but I got to hear from you. Come on, don't let me down on this one, man.
You know what? When I think about events, right?
Yeah,
I think the value of the event is rooted in the objective. What are you trying to yield as an outcome? Think about the outcome and work backwards, right? Because we have a lot of ideas of what we think is really good. A perfect example, I had a client they were like, my culture is awesome. And they had a number of issues that were validated their culture isn't. But particularly their employees spoke about this holiday event. When I tell you this company went all out and they bought all kinds of gifts, flat screen TVs, and their intent was to motivate employees and blah, blah, blah. Most of their employees rode their bicycles to work, carpooled, half of them shared living spaces. Most of them didn't have their own living scenario. Flat screen TVs became almost discouraging. It reminded them of what they couldn't do, what they didn't have. They couldn't even take the TV home, most of them. Some of them weren't even sure if they would have electricity on, let alone, but yet this company's thinking that this is going to drive a positive outcome. Be cognizant about what are you really trying to drive in that, which requires some input or understanding from the people. So I would tell you, regardless of the event, I don't have a particular event in mind. It's going to have to work for your people and the outcome you're trying to drive. So solicit some thought, not, hey, you want to go bowling, or you want to, hey, what's motivating you? What are your thoughts on how we come together and foster what? Connection, collaboration, relationship. What do we want to get out of this? Because then that's going to drive the decision around the around the event in the first place. And hopefully it's rooted in your core values. But whatever that is, I would just say, hey, all events are great. If you're making that investment, people appreciate it. If it actually connects to some real purpose and they are clear about what that purpose and objective is. Otherwise, hey, you can go axe throwing, but what does that do for your organization? And a lot of folks never think that through fully.
Yeah, it's interesting, thinking about, going back through the different things. Some of them, and you could fall flat on an event, and then that doesn't feel good either, because maybe it wasn't a good one. So, any other tips? You talked about the feedback loop for, leaders and getting, feedback on how they're living the core values. Any other tips on systematizing culture within the group?
There's so many things. The biggest tip is call us.
Tell us the website. We got to know where to find you, man. How do we get a hold of you?
If you go to Get CultureWorx, and that's works with an X, so Get Culture, CultureWorx.com, then you'll have all our contact. You'll be able to see a little glimmer into some of the software tools we build, that kind of thing. And we're making some really cool updates to our website, so you'll be able to see a lot more of what we do. So that's a nice place to reach us. I would tell you, look, let's just start with some cultural CPR. We talk about this in the book. Let's just start with, ask yourself, can you even recite your core values? Do you even understand their importance or why they even matter to the organization? Have you applied any measure of discernment around what they actually mean and how they're impacting your bottom line? Like, start having those conversations. And what I think you'll find fairly quickly is, we have some work to do if these are truly important to us. And then once you start to do that, start to evaluate what does the embodiment of these values really mean to us, and how do we start to mobilize our leaders around it? I say go back to the starting line for most organizations, because a lot of times that's what's required to really start to build a level of awareness and consciousness before you could ever start to get your leaders to be intentional around practicing these values or behaviors associated with these values. So in many cases, I say start from the scratch. We do what we call a culture assessment, because in many cases, we have to really evaluate what's happening in your organization, even when you think your culture is okay. There are some opportunities always to drive true management of culture in a real tangible.
What's the biggest mistake that you typically see when you're doing that cultural assessment? So you do a cultural assessment. What's the big glaring thing that you see in most organizations?
And well, glaring is assuming that any leader understands what it means to actually practice any of your core values. I think another big mistake that we see is most organizations don't use those behavioral expectations or standards as a measure of success. They still root a leader's success in performance metrics alone, revenue, what have you. They forget the tactical side of execution has a lot to do with how the leaders are actually engaging, interacting. So my measure for you is no longer your ability to produce X amount of widgets or to drive this amount of revenue. My measure for you is how you engage and interact and make decisions rooted in my standard for how I want you to do that. That's what then is going to help you sustain that revenue or those metrics or what have you. So there's always a disconnect, especially for the companies who promote within. Their best operator becomes their lead, becomes their supervisor. They never actually foster the development of leadership skill, competency, and behavior. They just say, hey, you produce really well, but do you really know if that person can lead others? And the measure of that person's success, right? Have you said, hey, Mr. Sir, ma'am, your measure of success is no longer what got you here. Your measure of success now is how you engage, how you interact, how you develop your people. And that's a different metric. And most organizations never have that hard conversation.
We, with our property managers, one of the most glaring things that is in line with what you're saying is there's two lanes. You have your performance profitability lane, and then you have your intrapersonal cultural lane and the other one. And many times people can exceed in one or the other. and it's hard to get those to intersect many times. So on one hand, you may have someone that's a rock star, making a bunch of money, doing everything right, scheduling vendors, getting the work pulled through, but they're a train wreck when it comes to interpersonal cultural stuff. Or you get the person that you love over here who is everybody's best friend, but then they're lagging on the other hand when it comes to profitability. So there's that balance, or that juggle is always so challenging, especially in our business. And I'm sure for most businesses.
Sure. There is a synergy between the systems and processes in your business and the leadership behaviors, right? The systems and processes that help you drive revenue and efficiency and all those things in your business are really the what, the where, the when. The behavioral piece is really about how you do it and why you do it. And if you can align the what, where, when with the how and why, that's where you optimize performance. Otherwise, I promise you, those people who appear to be excelling through key performance indicators like revenue and acquisition of clients and all those things, they are still, there's a marginal opportunity of improvement that they'll never get to until they address the other side, and vice versa. Typically, the people who can embody the behavior side of what you're looking for are missing the opportunities to leverage the systems and processes that enable them to do the other work. So it's really finding a merge of those things and helping people make those connections. You do this behaviorally, you can go 10x on your performance. And here's how, and here's why. Right. So it's just making those connections. And that's a lot of the work we do. We help organizations make those connections.
It's trust, man. You got to build trust, and you can have the employee that's a rock star performer, but if you don't trust in their ability to take your feedback and execute on the other side of the equation when it comes to the behavioral, when it comes down to the culture and the interpersonal, and if you can trust that person can do it, and they got to have trust for you as well. But so much of it comes down to trust, and that's to me many times the difference maker.
Oh man, in every organization, we have what we call our culture transformation clients. And for every organization that's engaged in the culture transformation, they are lacking in trust. Trust is foundational to much of what we do in an organization. So,
yeah. I like asking people, I'm going to ask you now, any books that you've read in the last, couple of years that have added value to your life that you want to share with the folks?
Oh man, I like, what stands out to me is From Good to Great. I've read The Rockefeller Habits as well. I followed Vern Harnish quite a bit. I'm aware of the scaling up and what have you. I like the approach that is taken in how you mobilize an organization to drive or exceed any perceived thought, right? That's the big, hairy, audacious goals that we have and how to achieve them. So those are two books that stand out to me. I'm a Covey fan in general, so any Stephen Covey books are going to stand out to me. Marcus Buckingham, any of his works. I'm a Strength Finders fan, stuff like that. Probably all books you've heard and have read, but those just stand out to me top of mind. I'm a bit of an academic, so I'll read a lot of just studies and white papers and articles about human behavior and organizational psychology and stuff like that, because I'm just fascinated by how people function. But those stand out to me. Hopefully that helps.
Very cool. No, it's all really good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, Gino, you got the purple shirt on today. What are you going to do? How you going to bring us home here?
The children told me it was lavender, just to correct that.
Dude, lavender is lovely.
You like lavender, don't you?
It's a yeah, you stepped it up, man.
Dr. D, coming from Philadelphia down to Atlanta, moved a couple of years ago, writes this book, Culture to Culture. And the thing that really stands out to me is you promote what you permit. Now, as a father of 6 children, as an investor who has investors, as someone who owns apartment buildings, who has residents, I would challenge all the dads out there. I'm speaking specifically to the dads. If you're a leader of your family, which you should be, you're the patriarch. You have goals, you have desires. If you're permitting your children to do stuff, you're promoting it. And then I have 6. So if I'm letting my first or second one do it, my fourth and fifth one, I'm going to lead on and go, well, that's not fair. So be aware. Be conscious of that. And that's a very hard thing because, a couple of months ago, I was permitting something that I shouldn't have been promoting. So I'm guilty of it. And I'm going to have that on my wall every day that I get up. I am going to be aware of that because I'm going to hold myself accountable. I'm going to have Jake hold me accountable. When we see something wrong, We're going to call it to ourselves and say, we're allowing this to happen, and it's on us. And I think culture starts with what you want your company to be. I had one restaurant for over 20 years. I didn't have core values. I didn't have a culture. I've been blessed over the last 5 or 6 years to accumulate with my partner over 1,500 apartment units. That didn't happen because of luck. That happened because we created these types of core values, and we made tons of mistakes, and we're going to continue to make mistakes. But I think if our company and our education students, they see us as being transparent, authentic, and honest, they see that, let's say, okay, we always make mistakes, but we're always trying to strive to do better. So everybody out there, go pick up the book. It's an amazing book. It's a great read. And once again, Dr. D, what's the website?
Visit us at Get CultureWorx with an X, GetCultureWorx as in xylophone. GetCultureWorx.com. Check us out.
Books on Amazon too?
You bet. Amazon, Borders, any major book supplier, you can pick it up. Pretty inexpensive. You can get it on audiobook as well, and listen to it. It's an easy read. It's a fun listen. We picked a great guy. Sounds like Liam Neeson.
Oh, baby.
I have a particular set of skills to help you define, implement, measure, manage your company culture. So no, it's a great listen as well. So check us out.
Hey, Dr. Vaughn, really appreciate your perspective today, and thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.